I'm Zach Walker, and this is the DIUx podcast, where we catch up with alumni. I'm joined today by David Schiff. David, thanks for joining us today.
For having me, Zach.
So you were in DIU for 4 months in 2018 as part of a fellowship as a Navy civilian. Could you talk a bit more about how you got to DIU?
Sure thing. So I had heard about DIU through the press about a year prior to starting my investigation into being a rotational there. My impressions from the media were that Secretary Carter and many others were very excited about the opportunities that DIU was presenting. Back then, DIUx was presenting in the Valley, Boston, and then certain brilliant people in Austin and DC as well. I really wanted to be a part of that effort because what I saw was outreach to the industry partners we had not had in the last 20, 30 years, kind of better engagement between defense and industry and academia, and then also just the idea of trying to do things in a different way, trying to bring meaning to the terms we need to do it faster, and then bringing lots of different service members through the reserves and active duty, civilians, contractors, and people with lots of commercial experience all into the same building.
Excellent. So what was the actual path for you to get into DIUx as a Navy civilian? We don't have a lot of civilians. That's why I ask.
Yeah. So the NAVC is the shipbuilding program manager, essentially an engineering agent for the Navy. And I had gotten into a 2.5-year executive fellows program, which you essentially could create your own path. My first stop had been at the Navy's budget office, FMB, running the weapons portfolio before coming to DIU. A few of my mentors, including now Rear Admiral, 2-star Admiral Selby, and Mr. Bill Bray, who's now DAS and RDT&E, had both seen that in my IDP, my plan, and they were encouraging of that rotation. So I reached out and I eventually found Jason Knudsen, who was a lieutenant at the time at DIUex headquarters in Silicon Valley. I created that plan. I had senior executive support for that rotation and my wife's support, just as importantly. Leaving a young daughter behind for 4 months was going to be a challenge. And right after that, I was actually heading to the Gulf Coast for the supervisor of shipbuilding, just to understand more how we oversee Huntington Ingalls, Austal, Textron, and other shipbuilders in the Gulf Coast. But trying to connect each of my rotations to the way we can be more innovative across the Department of the Navy. So when I had found Jason, he helped usher me in the front door of DIUx in late February, early March of 2018, and definitely no going back from there.
Now, you're a former Navy officer, but coming in as a civilian is a little bit different, right? What was it like to be a civilian in an organization that is so much of a military contractor?
I think I felt both comfortable and excited by being in, even though a lot of folks don't wear their uniforms, most of the folks in Silicon Valley were uniforms, either active duty or reserves. I loved being around people from all the different services and getting exposure to people from an Army cyber background or an Air Force PJ, which I didn't even know that we had parajumpers in the Air Force. Learning their perspectives, and then when we would attack a problem for one of the commercial solutions openings, having their perspective and my civilian and military background, having commercial executives all in the same room, so we could really attack a problem from different angles, really prosecute whether a company was good for defense, whether a program office really understood its need. Having those conversations across those bounds was just really exhilarating for me.
What were some of the other things that you got involved in DIUx? You'd mentioned doing some project work. Could you talk a bit more about that?
Sure. So there were a lot of, at the time, just other transaction authority projects getting liftoff, and I was part of the multi-phase interviews with both companies and with programs, trying to essentially create that perfect match between what a program office said they needed and that a systems command, a warfare center, or a military unit, and then making sure we curated that problem. And then on the flip side, on the industry side, making sure that we were finding the best of the best for not always non-traditional industry partners, but making sure that we were connecting defense organizations with either technology or capability that they had not seen before. What I've noticed as a Navy civilian is that we're oftentimes so busy building a ship or a combat system or an aviation platform that we don't necessarily have time to do the breadth of market research that we would like to do. And we also don't have that geographical proximity to where some of those really exciting things are happening. So DIU's placement in the Valley, Boston, Austin, and DC really gives it a lot of amazing capability.
And even though you were with us for 4 months, you had said that the experience was transformative. I'm curious what that means.
Yeah, so walking in the door to what seemed to be a typical Army Reserve building and then realizing that nothing about DIUx was typical, it was pretty helpful for a mind shift for me. Just the simplicity and elegance of the onboarding at the time, just someone handing you a brand new computer with digital tools that worked right away and using commercial Wi-Fi, having everyone be, even though some people are in uniform, most people are in casual civilian clothes because the focus is on getting work done and not on impressing each other or outranking each other. And even though I respect the military's hierarchical bureaucracy, I also realize that sometimes to truly innovate, you need to separate people and let them think deeply and have exposure to other things, and then bring that back to the organization the way that Google and Amazon do. So I was very excited to be part of something that was so different from what I'd been used to. It wasn't just the facility, the furniture, or the casual clothes, or having access to all these different branches of service. It was just the entire experience was different.
And a lot of our alumni have gone on to work in other DoD innovation organizations, and you were a really great example of that with NavalX. So you picked up the X that we dropped, perhaps. Could you talk
Yeah,
a bit
saved
more?
the X.
Yeah, you save the X. What should DIUers know about NavalX?
It's important to understand about NavalX that we are really trying to connect not only across Department of the Navy, which is the Navy and Marine Corps, the acquisition workforce and the military side of our service, but also our lines of effort, which include tech bridges. These are off-base, off-site locations similar to DIU, where much like a WeWork space, kind of low barriers to entry for industry, academic, and military engagements, whether it's a tech demo or a prize challenge or a panel discussion. These are things we want DIU folks and other folks to join us to either participate or to at least attend. And then we have a line of effort called the Centers for Adaptive Warfighting, which exposes Navy sailors, Marines, and civilians to Agile Scrum, human-centered design, and lean startup methodologies. We would love to have DIU folks join those courses. There's no cost, except for if you have to travel. And then some of that stuff, because of coronavirus, we're doing virtually now. So opportunities there. If you need a platform to let people know what DIU is working on, we have a great engagement team headed by Matt Denny, who goes by Mohawk Matt on LinkedIn and Facebook. And then we definitely are also rewarding the behaviors we want to see through an agility awards program that's at the Undersecretary of the Navy level. So that program is intended to let people know, hey, you're doing something risky, and we appreciate that because it's going to help the department. Or you learned a lesson, and instead of punishing you for learning a lesson, we're going to reward you and tell people, like, this is the kind of risk we want to see. So those lines of effort. And then we have a digital line of effort too that I think is interesting. If nothing else, we're trying to create a customer relationship management database through NavWar and the industry side.
So part of DIU is the National Security Innovation Network to build networks of innovators. Is that similar to what NavalX does?
We definitely have some, we're obviously at the service level. So Department of the Navy includes the Marine Corps. We do have some overlap with INSIN, with National Security Innovation Network, but they happen to also, their leadership comprised of a few folks who I am friends with and have worked with in volunteer capacities outside of work through Defense Entrepreneurs Forum. So Morgan Plummer and NavalX have a very tight relationship, and we're definitely aware of each other's programming and try to leverage each other whenever possible. In fact, one thing I know that's important to you is that I cover the fact that NavalX does meaningful handoffs to DIU and vice versa when it's appropriate. One of my friends at DIU, Eddie Brown, called me about a month ago and said, Naval Air Station Oceana is doing some pretty improve, I guess, innovative improvements to the base, they could use a little help and some support. DIU is already involved, but would NavalX like to be involved? Similarly, when something crosses into one of your portfolios, whether it's AI/ML or human systems or IT, and I know that those are changing year to year a little bit, we usually give someone a call who we know at DIU and say, would this be of interest to you? This seems like a better fit for you than for us.
That sounds like a great way to build impact across organizations, to put some kind of structure around everything that we're doing. What do you wish you had known when you got to DIUx back in those early days of 2018?
In some ways, I wish I had moved my family out there. My wife's from San Jose, so she was definitely feeling some sadness that she wasn't out there with me. I wish I could have brought them out for a longer time and spent more time not only working on projects, but kind of the strategic level planning for how can we make this thing more impactful for each service. I know for the Navy, there were fits and starts on how do we engage with DIU, and then DIU the same thing. How do I find the right doors in the Navy to interact with, and the right people, and what are projects that will mean something? And I think that what I've really taken away in the last year or two is that customer discovery and asking beautiful questions is important. Like, you need to really understand your customer, not assume things about what their problem is, but actually sit down like we are right now and ask them really powerful and insightful questions, and then listen to the answers. So it's something that I've been trying to improve in my own experience. And then human-centered design, which I think is definitely a focus for NavalX, I think is critical for understanding your customer and helping your customer get to the problem that they actually want to solve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How could DIU moving forward do a better job of that?
I think that staying involved with these cross-organizational things like the salon that I've created, being involved in events that each other are hosting, whether it's through the organization itself officially or through things like Defense Entrepreneurs Forum, or there are federal innovation networks, all sorts of other forums, those things informal, and then the formal ways of connecting. I think thinking of each other not just when it's a Navy problem. When DIU sees a Navy problem, that seems like an easy fit, like let's call NavalX. But I think also thinking of each other when there's an opportunity to collaborate on something that might be very different, or something that may lead us down a path together that, where we'll be successful together.
So you're at NavalX. Of course, we have AFWorks, Army Applications Lab. A lot of the services are building their own innovation-like organizations. Curious, I know we didn't plan this question out, but in the last 2 years, what have you seen about the way that DIU is perceived? Because we're not the only game in town anymore.
Yeah, I think that, what I've noticed is it's very much based on personality of the person representing DIU to the organizations with whom they're engaging. So if the person in a portfolio sees an opportunity and finds the right door in the Navy or Marine Corps in our case, or with the Air Force or Army in other cases, or special ops, on that side of the house, coming in with the attitude of, hey, open arms, I'm not here to sell anything, I'm part of the department. And we say this at NavalX too, like, we're not a private company, we're part of the Department of Defense and Department of the Navy in our case. We want to help you accelerate problem X. Would that be helpful to you? Or are you interested in some of the other opportunities that we provide? So a little more, I think, coming in with humility and appreciation for what that organization is already doing, has already achieved, because sometimes it's easy to see the really cool, shiny objects coming out of Silicon Valley or Seattle or Boston and think, man, we're really far behind. In some cases, that might be true. But if you come to a program that's been very successful, for example, PEO Carriers has been arranging and contracting and engineering the construction and sustainment of aircraft carriers for decades. That has kept us safe as a country for decades. So I think approaching with the humility of knowing that while they may not have the best containerization, right? They might not be using Kubernetes, they may not be on the fastest networks yet. They do something critically important in national security. So we should go in with that appreciation. NavalX has to think the same way. If I go to a NavAir or a NavWar PEO, I have to go in with the understanding that I don't know everything, but I'm here to see if I can help you accelerate your programs.
We're from the government and we're here to help.
Yeah, I was trying not to say that, but yeah, that's
I'll say it for
true.
you. No, it's true. It's a very good perspective to be able to understand that there's a lot more than just bringing in the new technology. And I think that's one thing that we talk about with the national defense strategy is it says it's not just enough to have new technology. That's the easy part in a lot of ways. The hard part is actually integrating it, getting it transitioned, getting it implemented. And as you alluded, right, that's got to be done in partnership with the different organizations. It can't be done in a forced kind of manner.
Yeah, and I think something I think you'll agree with, and this is something I beat a drum on all the time, is when we say it's about people, we better mean what we say when we say it's about people, and people are first. I don't know if we always treat people that way whether it's through the civilian HR process or the military's detailing processes. I think we need to be aware of newer generations of people are going to be looking to us for are you doing not only cool cutting edge stuff? I do want to use digital tools I like on my phone and in my laptop. That's true. We should be moving forward with DevOps. I think software development is exciting people right now. Kessel Run has led the way in a lot of ways in that arena. The Navy is trying to follow in certain respects. But you need to treat people like their priorities and preferences matter. And I think that that is much harder to do than any tech acquisition or tech integration. It's leaders who know, for example, like Zach might want to go to the Joint Staff, or Zach might want to leave the military and come back later. If we're flexible about that, Zach's more likely to do that. And so when we recruit and retain, it's much easier to recruit and retain high quality talent when you're flexible about what they can do. I understand the mission comes first, and sometimes the mission requires a submarine nuclear engineer to go to a submarine. But in other cases, if that gentleman or lady is asking for a year extension, can we be flexible about that? If they're asking for 2 years in San Diego instead of another year underwater, can we be flexible about that? We've got to care about our sailors, Marines, and airmen's mental health. We have to care about, if you really want to retain talent, you should treat them as if they're the talent.
No, that's very well said. And that ties in with other conversations we've had. One of the nation's best counter drone software developers we lost because he wasn't flying helicopters, and the Navy really wanted him to fly helicopters. So it's true. It's something that we really need to work on better as a department. You're right about the human capital piece. It really is critical. We're running a bit short on time, so I'll turn it back over to you if there's anything I should have asked, but I didn't.
I think it's important for us to look, as I think DIU often does, at the Department of Defense as a single organism, like a federated organization, and not so much as a group of competitors who have to beat each other out for a zero-sum budget. I think that our system was set up in that way in the 60s and 70s, and we very much see each other, I think, as opponents in a game. And I think that the real opponent, the real adversary, is obviously external to the United States, and we need to remember that when we work with our sister services and with Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence community. There are parts of the DoD that this is day-to-day. They do work across those boundaries as part of their jobs. But many of us see each other as an adversary, and I think that has to change so that we can better share information, ideas, innovation. I think you really get to true innovation when you have a diverse and included team. We heard from a really talented speaker named Franz Johansson last summer with Mr. Gertz, who talked about how diversity and inclusion are not just fun buzzwords, they are key to true innovation. And he had statistical analysis to prove that. I think that the better we work together across not only nationality and gender and different branches of service, but different mindsets, really bring to bear concepts we'd never even considered before. And that was something that I loved at DIU, was working with people who thought very differently. I remember Enrique Odie and David Willard, goes by Mud, Sean Singleton, Jason Knutson, just really changed the way I thought about what innovation could be and what collaboration should be. And I think that's key for us moving forward.
Well, and all of them now are DIUx, they're alumni. And it sounds like a great way to help continue that and really get to that goal is to do a better job of engaging those alumni networks. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful to hear about your perspective from NavalX and that you're doing really cool things after you've left DIU. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.